Hey guys, welcome to another Facebook Live on my fan page. I will wait a little bit for you to come till I see that somebody is actually listening to me. This is the live for the event about emotions. So the topic of today's live will be emotions. And of course, if you have any questions, then feel free to write them in the comments, and I will try to answer live. If not, I will try to answer later when we finish. This is absolutely topic open for discussion. So if you want to add something, if you want me to clarify something, then feel free to do it. The Polish version of this one will be today at 7:30 p.m. So in half an hour. So if you want to listen to the Polish one, just come back in 1.5 hours. I think the emotions topic, I was kind of hesitant to do it because I think this is, it's not exactly my place to talk about it because I'm not a neurobiologist or a psychologist. I want to be a behavior analyst. I'm not yet one, but that's what I hope to be in future. So I will be looking from my perspective, and I definitely think there are multiple perspectives, and every perspective has something to add. But basically, I think this topic is challenging because we feel very emotional about it. And I definitely, we're going to discuss what emotional means, but I think many people react, have a strong opinion on certain things and about the emotions. So I was kind of like, should I really do it? Because many people may say that, oh no, it's not like what you say. It's like completely the opposite. But I think that we often argue about things that we just don't really define. It's like my recent article about timeout is that sometimes people start to argue about one thing. It's like, do you use timeout, right? And they say, one person says yes and the other says no, and then suddenly and they start to argue, like, why are you using this is such an awful procedure, and the other person says, but why do you say so? And it turns out that they argue about something completely different. And this is what I think happens when we talk about emotions. I think for me, emotions are a construct, are a label we create to a certain behaviors that are both operant and respondent, and to some sensations like feeling pain, experiencing the sensation of pain. And they are contextual. They never happen. It's like, because they are behaviors for me, and they do not happen in a vacuum, right? As Dr. Friedman says, that behavior does not happen in a vacuum. And I think emotions, they also do not happen in a vacuum. And I think that if we want to, we first need to define what we have in mind when we say my dog is fearful or my dog is anxious. And if we are able to define those, because my expectation and my visualization of a fearful dog may be completely different to any of you, or my picture of a dog that is joyful or that is anxious can be absolutely the opposite what you may think. Or it may be similar, but there will be some differences that may have a crucial role in actually defining it. And if we start arguing about it, then we may find out that we mean something completely different. And as with any construct, any label, there is no use of it if we don't define it. So if I say my dog is fearful, I need to explain what I mean by that. What do you mean? Like, if I say my dog is fearful right now, my dog is, he's afraid of you, for example. What do I mean by that? Do I mean that in this context, in this particular situation, he behaves like this and this, because tell the truth, we only can assess what emotion is happening if we define it, right? And if we describe it, we can only assess it by watching, observing the behavior, because we do not get inside the dog's brain. We cannot experience the sensations that are inside the organism. We can only see what's observable to us. And I think if we are able to notice certain behaviors, and we in a certain context, we will call them fear or joy. It's like, for example, if I say that shivering, dilated pupils, increased heart rate, like if I describe those for you, what would they mean? I mean, would it be joy or anxiety or fear? I think it can be all of it, depending on the context. And if we are able to place those behaviors in a context, and if we are able to describe the context, if we are able to describe those behaviors, then we can actually change it. Because if I say my dog is fearful, it's like, what can I do about it? I mean, if my dog is just fearful and this is inside him, then I have no actual tools, no actual possibility to change it. And if I say that my dog is fearful, and by that I mean in a situation where there are multiple people around that he doesn't know, and he has no option to move away from those people, he behaves, he starts shivering, he has dilated pupils, his heart rate increases, he wants to escape, this situation evokes escape or avoidance behaviors, and there is multiple behaviors we can call like that. And then I can really actually change it. So I think that, because if I say that, oh, he's fearful, I mean, what do you mean by fearful? Do you mean he's always fearful? Or do you mean he is fearful like just in this one situation, right? Or do you mean he is, do you think that he stays fearful all the time? I think the emotions, I mean, the constructs of emotion, those behaviors, both, I think, any emotion consists of operant behavior, like an example of a fearful dog I described just a second before, is the escape behavior. So those are the operant behaviors, like running away or lunging on a leash, hiding somewhere, or keeping distance. Those are operant behavior that are maintained by the consequences. And there are some respondent behaviors that operate on reflexes, and for example, shivering, heart rate, and changes in heart rate, dilated pupils, and they operate on a stimulus contingency. And if we put all these two together, and we add also some kind of a sensation, because there is also what was interesting during recent Clicker Expo, when Dr. Friedman was doing a lecture about emotion. She also described the difference between emotion of pain, with pain or without any physical pain, because we all can relate to a situation when we lose somebody important to us, either a dog or a person, and we experience pain, right? The sensation of pain, but it's absolutely a different one than when you break your leg, right? And I think that sensation, respondent behavior, and operant behavior together create what we call emotion, but it's always dependent on the context. And here we have two different approaches, like the main general approaches to emotions. One is the classical one, which operates on those innate emotions that are like hardwired in the brain, and they are something we are born with, and every human being, every living creature actually has the same circuit of, not human, every living creature, but I think some theories say that it's between the species, sometimes between every living being, or mammals, for example. But never mind. It's just that we have a hardwired circuit for fear, for joy, for those different scientists. They select sometimes similar but sometimes different emotions that are innate, that are like we are kind of like born with them. Like Panskip, for example, he has 7 of them, and this is the classical one. It's like those are, I mean, every anger is the same for every human being, or every joy is the same for every dog, right? But this is something I personally, and by what I read, what I learn, am not really inclined to believe, and I'm more likely to be convinced to the theory of constructed emotions that operates on that the emotion is a socially contextual, it's a construct, right? It's just another label that we give to sensations we have and those operant and responding behaviors. Because that's like the best book I can recommend that will explain this theory to you is How Emotions Are Made by Lisa Feldman Barrett. And I think this book is amazing. Definitely, will give you a different perspective if you only know the classical one. So I think it's really a great read. If you can get the book, I really recommend it. And she gives an example of how we actually create those emotions. So for example, there's a child and a mother. Child is I think it was the child was eating dinner and starts to cry, and the mother, it's a really small child, a toddler, and the mother comes to the child and says, "Oh, are you sad? Why are you crying? Are you sad?" And this kind of like creates the context for the child. The child learns that, okay, so when I experience those changes in my body in this context, it means I'm sad. And then there is another situation when the child starts to cry in a totally different context. And the mother comes and says, "Oh, do you feel anxious, for example?" Right? And then this moment goes into anxious category. Or there is a situation where the child witnesses a person in the mall, for example, that cries, and the child asks mother, "Oh, is this person sad?" And the mother says, "No, he's not sad. He's in pain." Let's say, for example, right? Or that, "Oh, yes." Or on the other hand, she may say, "Yes, this person is also sad. Yes, it's sad. That's why he's crying," right? And then it goes into this category of being sad, or maybe to a new one, like being in pain, right? So, and I think I'm really inclined to believe this theory because it's like when I consider emotions and how I perceive my emotions and my dog's emotions, is that they're very contextual. The same sensation I can have in my body, the same behaviors can really be they can relate to one emotions, or I lost my thought because I read a comment, sorry. So, sorry. Okay, I'm going to read the comment and then I'm going to go back to my foot. So Anya writes that for Panskip theory, it's not true that every anger is the same, only the anger in every mammal would activate the same brain network. Yes, exactly. I'm sorry for confusion. Yes, so I disagree with it because it was hard to, of course, I'm not in the position to, or maybe I am. I mean, we all should question things we know, right? So I think that by what I read right now, what I learn, this theory is outdated, and there are so many new theories that really gives you a different perspective and show you that there is no what Lisa Feldman Barrett calls a fingerprint of emotion. So I think it's hard. I mean, I'm not a neuroscientist, as I said, so it's really hard for me to say that no, it's not true. But I can only, base my knowledge on scientists, the researchers, and that I'm more inclined, for example, to believe because they give me more evidence that I believe is more convincing, for example. So yeah, but going back to the example, so I think when I look into my emotions and the situations that my emotions I've got my fault back. So I consider that we have, it's like I consider my emotions that sometimes how I feel can really be the same for I can consider it the same feeling, sensation in my body, same operant and respondent behavior, depending on the context, can actually be a different emotion depending on the context. So it's example I give when I talk about it is like when I had a very hectic time at work and I was really nervous and I had a lot of things to do, and I've had those moments of breakdown a little bit. And once I was in the car with my fiance, and I felt like I'm gonna have this breakdown. I feel really bad. I feel a lot of anxiety. And he asked me, when was the last time you've ate? And it was like, oh, it was a couple hours ago. I'm hungry. So the sensation, the emotion was not actually anxiety or being nervous. It was just hunger. And it got me back to thinking that, it got me thinking into that, that if I probably didn't have that learning history with breakdowns and anxiety, problems like we call usually anxiety, I would not consider a situation when I feel hungry to be this emotion. I would consider it just to be, oh, I need to eat something, right? So I think it's definitely very dependent on the context, because those changes in our body can be actually can be the same, just for a different emotion. And what Dr. Friedman says, and Dr. Friedman is one of the amazing people I have ever met, and she has a great knowledge, much greater than I do, and she talks about emotions as about labels, and that we need to, saying that my dog is fearful doesn't change anything. We need to know what fearful means. And I think as we work with animals, we don't work on emotions. We work on behaviors. We change behaviors, and by that, we want to change what we call emotion. So it's difficult to say that, if my dog is fearful, the only thing I can do is understand what are the behaviors behind fearful and what conditions and what I can do to change it. Because if I only say, oh, my dog is fearful, then I cannot do anything about it. It's like the worst advice I've ever got was like, don't focus on about my dog that has issues with aggressive behaviors, was don't focus on her behavior, focus on her emotions. And it was like, okay, but what do you mean by that? And for a very long time, I felt really frustrated because I didn't really know what I should do if I shouldn't focus on her behavior. And I think if we focus on the behavior, we have actual tools, actual possibility to change what we call emotion. So otherwise, we are kind of helpless, and we cannot really be responsible for helping our animal. There's a question I want to address. So Sarah says, what is the best way to navigate the idea common in the scent work community that you can activate the seeking system using food hunts? Karen Pryor herself talks about how clicker training activated the seeking system too. I can only say, because, and this resonates with my thinking, what Dr. Friedman said about seeking system. She said that this is just an assumption. The dog is not wired to the computer. It's not, the brain is not scanned at the moment, and we cannot say that this activates seeking system. And also, current research shows that there is no such thing as a seeking system because whole brain operates all the time. So I think this is really, we are not, as dog trainers and people working with behavior, we are not a specialist in terms of emotions and of brain. Those are different scientists, different people that go there. This topic is really extremely interesting, and I definitely want to get more into the brain stuff, but I think I have more to discover still in the ABA world than before I go there. Because for me, the most important part is how I can make my dog happier, and by that I mean relaxed muscle, wiggly, tail, relaxed movement, depending on the context, right? But Dr. Friedman recently said that if we talk about brain in this particular moment when something happens and about emotions, we only make assumptions, because we can never, if we are not in the laboratory and the dog is not connected to all the devices that check on his brain, we can never really say that for sure. And recent researchers also say that there is no such thing as seeking system activated. The whole brain operates all the time. So I think that a while ago, it was one of the main theories that was, that was the main one, right? Like everybody really listened to it, the Panskip and other classical theories. And now it slowly changes into that, oh, maybe there is something more into it. And I think we know currently very little about the brain and very little about what we call emotions. And this will change, but we need to discover more things. And there are definitely some, well-known scientists doing this and doing researches and showing what has changed throughout those years. So it is simply better to, as Tara says, so it is simply better to respond by saying that when a dog seeks other, it is simply learning. Yes, I would say so, absolutely. I mean, for me, this is much better way, because this is actually, if he's learning, then he's changing his behavior due to consequences, or if it's a respondent behavior, then something, the pairing comes in hand. But yes, I would definitely say that what I can see when the dog is searching is that the dog is actually learning, so changing his behavior due to consequence. And we can see the change of the behavior. I think if we talk about emotions, we can actually see the changes in behavior that represent the changes in the emotion. But emotions for me are really just a label. I would rather say, the sensations. For me, it's a better word I would use. Feelings, of course, and I think this debate whether or animals have or don't have emotions is absolutely pointless, and I don't even want to get there because we are all living creatures. I don't divide us and animals into different categories because it's not relevant to what we talk about. So yes, I would definitely say that it's better to talk about things we can actually operationalize, and that we can actually see, and that we can observe, right? We can observe, and we can analyze them and change them, operating on the environment. Because if you want to, if your dog is afraid and you want to make him confident, what do? You still work on behavior, right? If we agree to talk that I wanted my dog to be more confident, then still we need to define what confidence is. And it's going to be different for every individual. So again, we go back to the study of Dr. Friedman, because every individual, every living creature is a specific individual. And how they respond to specific changes in the environment is due to the learning history, definitely genetic factor, and the conditions they are in. So I think if we really focused on those more tangible aspects of what we call emotions, it would be definitely easier for us to orientate within those emotions world. And it will also be more clear, I think, for the people who start working with dogs or any other animal. It's like this worst advice I've ever got was you should focus on her emotions and behavior. If someone who just starts doing something with dogs, training, gets an advice like that, it really doesn't give you a clue what you should do. It just gives you some kind of a label, some kind of a concept, and nothing really to, start with. So that's something, for me, being able to operationalize what I think my dog is experiencing right now in terms of feelings has made me a more thoughtful trainer, and definitely more ethical one, because I can know I don't have access to his brain, I don't have access to feelings, So I have to read the behavior. So I'm becoming a more thoughtful trainer because I can observe the behavior better, but because I have to do it. And the ethical aspect of working with dogs is also extremely important here, because I don't know how my dog feels. So of course I want him to be happy. And by happy, I mean, depending on the situation, variety of things. But if I define it and I can really, change his behavior to get this outcome, then I can be really successful. Otherwise, it's just, wishful thinking, I would say. Okay. Do we have any other questions? Just have to look through the list to see if I missed someone's question. All right, I didn't. So does anyone have a question about what we talked today? All right. It's like people very often okay, there is one. Yeah. What about more subtle emotional construct like curiosity? My rabbits, for example, have this old habit of coming out of their cubbies. How do you say that? Cubbies? Correct me, please. To approach my dogs with behaviors that I can only characterize as curiosity. I don't reinforce them for this, but they are obviously reinforced by it because they repeat it even after the dogs move and run, and they run away again. It's interesting. I would say it's, this is what we call in our social context, curiosity. So it's just what we call it. And maybe in a different culture, if your rabbits were born maybe in Asia or in some tribe in South America, then people would perceive their behavior not as a curiosity, but as something else. It's like with emotions that we have in our culture, there may be some other cultures that have less or more words that describe emotions. So, and they usually are the same. Copies, thank you. They are, maybe even the sensation and the behaviors are the same, but the name, the construct is different. So I think what your rabbits do is, of course we can label it curiosity, but we need to know if this curiosity was a problem behavior, then we would need to define it. We would need to define, specific antecedents, specific consequences related to that behavior, and change it. So I would say that it's more like what we are socially constructed to call, and what we are, socially, it's like the way you were raised, your learning history, and the society you live in, the culture you live in. It makes you call it, you've learned to call it curiosity. But what is behind the curiosity, right? So it's I don't say it's, I call my dogs happy, angry, anxious often, but I can describe what I mean. For me, it's like with a healing, right? Somebody comes to me and says, oh, I want my dog to have this, wonderful, flashy healing. And I'm like, okay, but what do you mean by that? Because for me, wonderful healing is, head position in this place, collected trot, and, I have all those criteria I consider wonderful healing. But for you, wonderful healing can be absolutely different. And I think it's the same for emotions. It's like, for me, a happy dog is something different from what you perceive. And I think if we consider your rabbit's curiosity a behavior, then, because it's nothing wrong with calling it curiosity, unless you have to work on this curiosity. So you need to change it. And I think there are some behavior patterns, behaviors that appear that we have no real explanation for. So if we want to get it more into the emotional world, just to because it's easier for us, because we don't see what is reinforcing, what is punishing for this particular behavior. So it's sometimes easier to say, oh no, he's just curious, right? And this makes us like kind of, takes off the responsibility. So, Sarah wrote something. Survival should dictate they stay hidden around predators, and yet they venture out. I wonder about it every time. I keep thinking that if they were terrified, hiding all the time, they would die. They need this curiosity in order to come out and find food. Just thinking about it in terms of constructs is interesting. Yeah, and I think because we could analyze the behavior and, you should take data and then it would be wonderful to see how the behavior changes. And if it was the same, for example, if they met not your dogs, if, for example, in the room were not your dogs that they know the smell of those dogs, but different dogs. So dogs they don't have a learning history with. So maybe the behavior would have been different, right? Maybe the behavior would not be, curiosity, what we call curiosity in this case, but maybe it would be, being frightened, because they would stay in the cubbies. I hope this time I was correct. Yes, and John wrote that they also are not punished for coming out, so behavior changes, because I think dogs also, they do certain behaviors that we would consider not really best option for surviving in a natural world. But we adapt our behavior. We change our behavior because of the consequences in the environment. And this is, the whole learning is based on adapting, changing your behavior due to consequences, right, to make an outcome in the environment, to operate in the environment. And I think if your rabbits see that, learn that nothing happens if they go out, then, and even the behavior is reinforced, because maybe, I don't know what's reinforcing for rabbits, but maybe your social kind of approval, if it happened, maybe not, maybe interaction with a dog, maybe ability to find some kind of food in the room. I think this is just me guessing, right? But if we say that it's curiosity, then it's absolutely fine if we can define it. And until, and even if we don't define it, okay, but if you want to change it, then you need to define it. I don't know, does it answer your question? I think, yes, there are so many behaviors I would consider really much easier sometimes to talk about in terms of sometimes construct, because it's like kind of leaves me, it gives me more opportunity to take the responsibility. But I think if we want to really be able to influence the welfare of our animals, we need to stay more on the side of operationalizing and observing what is behind the label, behind what we call emotion. Yeah. Okay, just look if there is no other question, because sometimes I miss those questions. Okay. Okay, is there one? Yeah, good answer. Yes, good. Sarah wrote, yes, good answer. I'm just pondering it. May not be curiosity at all. I think like the other example Dr. Friedman gave is the color of red, the red color, and that there are some tribes that consider red and orange. And is it red really red, or is it orange, or it really depends on the culture and our history? So I think there are many things that, they are not easily observable, that are not defined, that will always be related to how you are raised and what is your learning history, what culture you grew up in, what people you've met, and all those things that create your constructs. But those constructs are very often just, our very subjective view of things. And I think they are also very often just assumptions if we make it to concerning someone else, so or some other living creature, and even human. So I mean, I think it's sometimes easier to use construct if we defining construct, but in a conversation sometimes it's easier to say I know that, oh, my dog is happy, my dog was happy when we trained last time. And this may be easier if the other side knows what I'm talking about, but it could be more difficult and make more mess in the conversation if we both have a different idea what we talk about. Okay. So yes, I think it's always interesting to talk about emotions, and I would love to know more about the brain, about how it works, and I try to learn as much as I can. But what really resonates with me is what Dr. Friedman said, that the brain works all the time. It's it's not just one circuit that was working right now, but the whole brain is active all the time. But I can also see why someone watching the behaviors like those demonstrated by my rabbits on a larger scale across species might be inclined to label it as a universal seeking system. Yes, and this is the thing with constructs, right? With the labels. Someone else may also call it being brave, right? That your rabbits are so brave because they go out and there are dogs around and they, feel so confident around those dogs. And I think, it's absolutely okay until you have to change it. And when I got there's this advice, you have to focus on her emotions, it was for me, I didn't know what to do. And I didn't change her behavior because I didn't do anything actually, because I was unable to, I didn't have tools. I didn't know. It's like, okay, so if I don't focus on the behavior, how do I know she is nervous right now? Or how do I know that she's, relaxed, mentally relaxed? I didn't know that. I didn't know that until I see that. And yes, I think we need to stop labeling behaviors when we work with animals and start calling them and what they really are. So behaviors with context, with environmental context, with antecedent and consequence. Right, brave. Sometimes I call them stupid. Yes, I can relate to my dogs doing few things like your rabbit sometimes. So absolutely. But yes, we can call our behavior, even within the same species, we can call our behavior, different label. And it's not that you are right and I'm wrong. We're just talking about labels, and they are very subjective and they are not real. They are not tangible. So if I cannot measure bravery or stupidity of your rabbits, neither can you measure the curiosity. And if you want to influence it, if you want to change it, you need to have a kind of like a way of measuring things, at least a rate maybe of it. And how would you rate being curious, or how would you rate being fearful, right? You can only rate, we can only operate on something really tangible and something that we can operationalize it. All right, and we'll check if I have any. Oh yeah, there is one. Andrea asked, please can you post the author and the title of the book regarding emotions you mentioned in the beginning? I will write it down later. It's How Emotions Are Made by Lisa Feldman Barrett, and I'm gonna add a link to Amazon to the book. The key really is context, Sarah writes. More important perhaps really than operationalizing the behavior itself. Yes, I think both are. Because if you cannot operationalize the behavior, then the context will not give you anything. So I would say that both are necessary, right? Both are crucial. But behavior out of context, yeah, because yes, I would say behavior is important. I mean, you have to operationalize it, but also you need to put it in the context, because behavior out of context means nothing, right? The same behavior in one context can be related to something completely different, some completely different emotion, what we call emotion, right? Than when it's put in a different context. So my dog shivering and performing behaviors that I would call fear, that will consider fear. So shivering, increased heart rate, dilated pupils, and trying to escape the situation, or growling, barking in some case. In one context, let's say, yeah, I can consider it fear, but on the other context, I may consider it play, right? It is joyful, maybe, yeah, even shivering, maybe without the shivering part. But maybe sometimes my dog got out of the water, right? He was playing and it got colder and he's shivering, right? Is this shivering fear, or is it just because he's cold? So without context, it's definitely impossible to talk about anything, not only constructs of emotions, but also behavior, because behavior does not exist in a vacuum. So we need to have the underlying context and underlying antecedents, consequences, not only the close one, but also distance one, the, all the, sometimes the background is important, right? The learning history is always, it always goes back, I think, to the learning history of this particular individual, and the behavior without that. I mean, we always need to look like in a broader scale, because otherwise it's just, if I look at the behavior, I won't tell you what it is, right? Why it's happening. If I see only the behavior, I don't see what happens before or after, what's the context of it, I'm not going to tell you anything. And but yes, I think that still, if we have a context and we only use emotion label to name what is happening, then it won't give us anything to change it unless we operationalize it. So to some extent, context is more important, but at one point when you want to influence the behavior, then you need also to operationalize the behavior. Okay, I'm just gonna how emotions are made. Copy. And Andrea, I just added a link to the book I've talked about, so it should be there to Amazon. Yeah, it's there. Okay. Does anyone have any questions? I mean, I love this discussion, and I really like to talk about emotions because it makes me understand them better. It makes me feel more it makes me feel more confident about talking about emotions. But it really relates to, I think, having very strong, it's like when I was a little bit afraid to do this live, because I think people, as I said at the beginning, they have very strong opinions about emotions. And when often you say something related to the animal's emotion, they say like, oh yeah, because behavior is they don't take into account any emotion. And it's like, no, really no, like read Skinner. And but I don't want anyone to feel that behaviorism is not taking account what we call emotions. They do. They only want to take the label out of it, define it, and then use it to change, to get the outcome, to change the behavior that is problematic for this particular individual. So it never goes to the, because people, I think, sometimes mistakenly consider this, that, oh, so I don't need to focus on emotions, it doesn't matter what my dog feels, I just look at the behavior. No, you look at the context, and we all want the welfare of the animal, the ethical part, to be on the highest level, and our dog, our horse, cat, rabbit, to have a joyful and pain-free, stress-free life. But it's that we can only do that effectively, I think, if we have at least some tools to use it, to work on it and to change it. And we have them if we look at the behavior. Okay. Please ask questions, because I mean, if you have any, because my voice is slowly going, like running away from me, because I've been sick the last 2 weeks, and I was not. I wanted to do this live a week before, but when I got sick, I changed the date because I barely talked. So, does anyone have more questions about this topic? And of course, if you watch it later, if you're not watching it live, just feel free to write a question in a comment, and I definitely be really happy to answer you. I think that we will know much more soon about the brain, about the feelings, about the sensations we have in our body, because science is evolving, people are discovering things, it gets better and better and more advanced, and we get to know things from the other angle. But for now, for me, I'm more confident to accept the theory of constructed emotions. So that that they are constructs, they're created construct in our cultural world. And I think those constructs, those labels, they are often a source of problems, because this is what I've learned also at LLA with Dr. Friedman, is that if you call a behavior dominant, right? I mean, a dog, you call him a dominant dog, and for me, dominance is another construct, because if we consider dominance an emotional state, because some people do, then if you say, oh, this dog is dominant, so something inside him is dominant, then not only this is like just a label, but the danger is that you may be more inclined to use aversive methods, to use punishment, because this dog is dominant, than if you just if you just name and operationalize the behavior. So, in the same, if you say that, oh, this dog is, he's furious, and he's just being pushy, or he's just, he's a very confident and drivey dog, that it's aggressive because he's he's just that way. Then some people, I mean, I'm not saying that we all, but very often some people may use more aversive methods because this is the way this dog is. And if we talk about behavior, it doesn't, we don't have those emotional context, we don't have this baggage included. All right. Let me know if you want me to explain anything more, or if you want to just dig deeper into some topic we covered today, or if you have any question. Just gonna look through. All right. Good. Okay. I know we have some sort of a delay, so you see what I say, you hear what I say a little bit later, but I think we are close to finishing here. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope you enjoyed, or it was something interesting for you, what we talked today about. And see you next time. I don't know what's going to be the topic for the next live. I'm going to let you choose it. There's going to be a survey. Just vote what you would like to talk about next time. And again, if you have any concerns, you want to write something, just do it in the comments and I will answer later. Okay, thank you so much. And in a few minutes, we will, in half an hour, 40 minutes, there will be a Polish version of the same live. So for those Polish people or foreign people who speak Polish, this is very rare, you can absolutely join the Polish version in 40 minutes. It's 7:30. Okay, thank you so much and see you next time.